And so
Mhm.
that's what makes it so hard, um, for Filipinos nowadays to see their investments in infrastructure and investments in all these projects that the government is doing. Because even if you have a good person, their projects aren't going to last long. No lasting impact, really. All right, and we are off. And ladies and gentlemen, first thing you'll notice is shown right here. He has a different background
I
because,
do.
as he mentioned, he's trying to copy mine, my beautiful plain.
Great background. I just got a
uh,
copy from the best, right?
yeah. Now that I think about it, like maybe I was thinking maybe I should paint this wall or put up a poster or something. It looks too plain anyway.
I don't know. There's also the bookshelves. I like the bookshelves.
Yeah, the bookshelf was nice, but then every time I moved, suddenly my arms disappear. I'm like, you know what? My hands need to be in the frame for this.
You need to
Well,
emphasize your words.
I don't know if I wanted to mention this because it's so hilarious. So before we started recording, Sean mentioned that he has not be not been keeping up to date with our episodes, which is such a huge blow for the podcast that the co-host doesn't even follow the updates that we've made. I was like,
Oh, I was
dude,
trusting. I was trusting already. I didn't need to
yeah,
verify.
it was just like he knows that it's out there, but just like didn't bother to see it, like every other video in the world. Well, we're getting into that and we're getting to videos. We're actually talking about something that we saw, and I said this to you because this talks about democracy, and I've actually been having qualms about it because
Mhm.
I've the one of the first videos that I saw a couple months ago was uh, John Belmar. So he's known because he does like these speaking events and he does a lot of podcasts and he does a lot of discussions online. One of the things that he said actually were reasons why democracy didn't work, and a big major reason for why democracy didn't work was because it was the voting of the average person. And if you look at the average person right now, the statistics aren't great. Average person isn't too smart, too well educated, especially in economics and politics. um, and I started thinking, how come democracy seemed to work in the States and how come it doesn't seem to have the same effect in the Philippines? And I think we found a video that describes very, very well why it didn't. So sharing this, and yeah, let's see um, each other's thoughts on this.
You really work in
No,
countries like this?
no.
You know,
Democracy doesn't work.
I was watching. Well, I did a video on this, and I was studying what Lee Kuan Yew was talking about, and he said,
Oh,
okay, he said the Philippines made a big mistake in terms of copying the U.S. Constitution and trying to copy the system of the U.S. In the U.S., it works because the U.S. is full of like natural resources. It's vast. It's it's just it has so many things going for it in such a young country. But in a country like this, um, where it's a what do you call it, a third world country or a
mm.
developing nation, it needs a very strong, honest leadership. Like in the case of Singapore, he was almost a dictator, but very honest and not corrupt, and it worked for Singapore.
So you're talking about a benevolent dictator.
Yeah.
So the idea of a benevolent dictator, I think Philippines wants that.
Mm-hmm.
Filipinos want that. That's why they voted for Duterte, thinking that would be their benevolent dictator. It's not the case, obviously, right? But they still believe it. Now, when it comes to copying government system, I don't think it's the. I mean, the system, yes, of course, it plays a little bit of a factor into it, but the other factor is respect for the law. Regardless of what the law is, you can put
Mhm.
any law in place. When people don't respect the law, then the law fails.
Right.
That's where the biggest problem lies. We don't respect the law here. The
Right.
law here is not something to be followed. It's a suggestion.
But why would people follow the law when they see policies maker and government officials doing whatever they want?
Hmm.
So that was interesting.
Yeah.
And
Okay, can I just
you,
say something? So this is my second time seeing it.
hmm
I think the first time we kind of had a brief talk about it, but something
right.
I noticed on the second time around was, in some ways, I was seeing it as though the person was saying that, like, making an excuse, where the
hmm
United States was able to be a democracy supposedly, and it's
hmm
working out really well because of their wealth of resources.
hmm
Yet, I think there's a lot of people that can argue that the Philippines has a lot of those resources as well. Obviously, it doesn't have that geographical location
Right.
that's ideal against all these other countries like the United States. But he also mentioned that word, third world country or developing country. And it kind of just reminded me back of when, in some ways, that's a marketing term where the United States and Russia during the Cold War is when we started using that first world country terms. So the first world country being the United States, Russia being a second world country, and
Mm-hmm.
everyone else being a third world country. And so he was even
Right.
using a term that kind of like stemmed out of thin air, trying to make
Right.
an excuse for the Philippines. And then talking about those wealth of resources. And the Philippines at one point, was it not the most economically strong country in Asia at one point?
Right.
So what happened there, right? And
So
then they were talking about Singapore, and I feel like Singapore and the Philippines has very similar uh, resources. It just turns out that one is better at managing it than the other.
I would actually. It's interesting how you pointed out that the Philippines was at one point like a first world country or like one of these rich countries, similar to how Singapore was
Mhm.
today. How Singapore is today. That's how the Philippines was before. And there's a couple of reasons that led to why that is. What I remember seeing an article, and the author states that one of the reasons why the Philippines is no longer in that position is because we've made it harder for investors outside the Philippines to invest. We made it so that only Filipino families could own it, therefore protecting this like system. But like we couldn't really welcome outside investors because if they wanted to open, like say if Walmart wants to open a branch here, they'd have to create like a shelf company
Mhm.
that is like Walmart Philippines, and Walmart Philippines needs to be majority owned by like Filipino investors, and that to them is like a big risk play. So
Mhm.
that's one hesitation why other brands don't really make it out here. If you actually look at if you actually look at most of the brands that are coming from international or that are international that are globally known and that make it in the Philippines, they are under shelf companies in the Philippines. There's this big company called AGI. Hang on, let me look
Oh,
up.
yeah, like a health company, pills company.
um, no, it's a holding company in the Philippines,
Mm.
and it stands for Alliance Global Group. So
Mhm.
Alliance Global Group, they are a holding company that owns these brands in the Philippines, like McDonald's, some clothing companies, Ralph Lauren, Polo, and a bunch of other things. And to think that that was one of the restrictions that was made. The other that I think is detrimental is that we somehow keep like trying to tax the rich, where it's really just affecting the people in lower incomes. Right now, we're trying to raise the minimum wage standard. I think it was around 200 pesos. Now we're trying to make it 300. And what a lot of people are saying, like a lot of people are saying, it's a good thing. But what most people don't realize is that if we raise the minimum wage, we're raising the expenses that a business has to pay, and
Mhm.
to offset some of these expenses, right, they have to let a bunch of people go, and so this is going to lead to higher unemployment, especially in an economy where we're just basically trying to recover. Going back to another interesting thing about the Philippines back then is when the Philippines was a first country world country, we were sort of under a benevolent dictator um, leadership, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
just the dictator leadership. So there is this president. His name is President Ferdinand Marcos. I think I'm not sure if you remember him. He's the person who spent a lot of money and was just basically living wealthily while other Filipinos were struggling.
So,
And
sorry, I have to interrupt you there. So he was
yeah,
living wealthily, even though at the time the Philippines was the number one economy in Asia.
I think it was like it's similar. Like one of the things that people have to realize with first world countries and third world countries, you have more of this gap. You have more of this gap. There's a great deal of number of rich people, and there's a great deal number of poor people, and not enough people in the middle. But the what do you call that? But the distance between the poorest and the richest isn't too far. Whereas first world countries, or like in places like the U.S., you have a lot of people in the middle. You got not too many like poor people outliers and not too many rich people outliers, but the gap between those outliers are extremely huge. And
Mhm.
so that's one of the things that people have to understand. And I think at that time, there was definitely not a lot of people living in the middle, and there was definitely a lot of people similar today. How there was the poor people, and then they see the rich people. There's a lot of them, and that's where the chaos really started. That's where people started to say like, "Oh, there's this corruption going on." And to be fair, the from my perspective, the presidency and his family was spending a whole lot of money at the time. But it was under a dictatorship. Like the Philippines was some sort of a
Mhm.
dictatorship, and that was
Mhm.
because like the Philip presidents, they didn't have to stay one term. They could stay more than a couple of terms. This Marcos president, he was about to run for his third term before people kicked him out. After him, and
Mhm.
this is why I think a system is the system already makes it impossible to have a benevolent dictator,
Mhm.
even if we wanted to, because after him, the next president, Cory Aquino, she's famous for driving President Marcos out. She made a law that says that no president can serve more than one term to prevent that dictatorship from repeating.
Mhm.
And so, even if we've had a good president, even a benevolent dictator, as the video states, it's impossible to do that because of the system that's in place. Because they cannot stay long enough to make the necessary long-term changes. If you think about anything that needs to change in a country, all of that is you need to suffer kind of in the short term in order to reap the long-term benefits. The problem with that, and we saw this in Duterte's time, when President Duterte was trying to make all these long-term changes, it was hard. It was making a lot of changes in the short term, and then when his presidency ended, people only remembered the suffering that happened in the short term, and a lot of his projects that he was trying to implement, were no longer continued when the new president came along. And so
Mhm.
that's what makes it so hard, um, for Filipinos nowadays to see their investments in infrastructure and investments in all these projects that the government is doing. Because even if you have a good person, their projects aren't going to last long. No lasting impact, really.
Sure, but I think first we gotta also establish that the United States of America is not a democracy. It is not. It is
Yeah.
a republic. I think when they were mentioning how the United States got to where it is, to provide some context on this,
Mhm.
the United States. Imagine being part of these 13 colonies, and you're fighting against a great superpower known as Great Britain, the United Kingdom, right? And you just won the war, and miraculously. You just fought off a dictator, let's say.
Right.
And then, so how do you kind of balance these things in your past and what you want to do in the future. And so there is that the United States founding fathers had this
Mm-hmm.
major debate on how they can balance the population and how they can govern themselves. And you were mentioning, yeah, the average person isn't that smart, might not really know what's going on, might not know what is best for the whole group. And so they did a balance of that, because that is correct, but at the same time the people should be able to choose what they want to do, what they are allowed to do. And so they settled
Mm-hmm.
upon a republic in which people like myself, a normal citizen, would then vote for somebody who will then vote for we will vote for a leader that will vote for a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And this will, in
What's that
general,
leader called? Like, what's that leader called who votes
so
for
these are
the?
the Congress.
Okay.
So congressmen, there's the Congress and then there's the Senate. There's a bunch of different
Mm-hmm.
separation of powers, so that there is a balance of powers. And one is based on population, and then one is to balance out those states that have less people. That everybody gets 2 senators. Each state has a senate. Each state has 2 senators, while their congressman is going to be based on how many people there are. So in this case, California has a lot more representation, followed by Texas because of their population. And this
Right.
would change actually. And so in some ways, this is good because, for example, if Texas gets more people from California, Texas will then get a bigger representation in
Mm-hmm.
speaking for the whole country, or vice versa. And so that kind of incentivizes worse states to do better to get more population, or to invite more companies, invite more people to get there.
Right.
And so, with that said, the United States, I think, is successful because of certain shared values. And miraculously, for example, how I feel about it is the Constitution is man made, but also inspired by God. And there are a lot of inspired men that helped shape the way on what being an American is. I think a great example of this, we're talking about benevolent dictators. Everybody thought that George Washington was going to be a king, because at this
Mm-hmm.
point in time, there hasn't really been anything else. George Washington became president, and then afterwards, after 4 years, he didn't want to be president anymore. But people wanted him to be president, so he ran a second time. And then he finished his other term, which he then finished 8 years. And then the
Mm-hmm.
people wanted him actually to run another time. It was almost expected. But George Washington set a precedent that he did not want that power. And that is a
Mm-hmm.
weird thing to do at that time period, when everybody wants that power, everybody wants that prestige. But he chose not to. And
Mm-hmm.
because of his example, the second, third, fourth, fifth presidents, those presidents that were able to get their second terms, they chose not to run for a third term out of respect for George Washington. Like,
Mm-hmm.
that's pretty phenomenal. That's I guess, like a benevolent dictatorship, a principle,
Like,
an
yeah.
example, an attribute that you'd want. But I think it's also, I feel like these people were inspired by God as well. Uh, Obviously, like, not in a way of like a prophet, but they were able to kind of shape the way the culture of America would be. And so,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the Philippines, you're talking about the presidency with a benevolent dictator. I think a benevolent dictator would do wonders for any country. And not every country should necessarily follow the steps that the United States has done, because then there's steps that the United States has done that took them backwards. But in this case of the Philippines, I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
not too familiar. I've never lived in the Philippines under the reign of Duterte, and
Mm-hmm.
so I can't really say. But my perspective of Duterte is that he made sure drug crime went down by a lot. That is
Mm.
my perspective of what he did, but I'm not too familiar with all these other things that he has done or hasn't done. And I think like that focus on him on the drug crime, I think is a good thing for the Philippines. And I think that is also similar to what Singapore has done. They've cracked down on drugs, and
Mhm.
really nobody is spared in a way.
Right.
And so, like, how would you see, like, for your perspective, how would you see a benevolent dictator shaping the Philippines in that time span of 6 years?
I think with a benevolent dictator, it's definitely it's hard to implement it in the short term, but it would be very similar to what Duterte did, where observance of the law and no and there's no excuse for breaking it, where you suffer the ultimate penalty for it. Similar, like again, say it's similar to other countries where they basically followed that. Vietnam and Singapore were one of those places where they just followed that structure and really took out the people who were causing so much problems. And China has such a similar history.
Hmm.
Did you know what happened when they did not take those people out? China has a history where they,
What do you mean take them out?
they spared the lawbreakers, they spared the opium addicts. And you know what happened to China? Like that superpower of a nation was conquered by Britain.
Mhm.
And they have a saying in Chinese where they say, like, weakness is the cause uh, uh weakness is the cause for much suffering. It's like like a lot of Chinese people know about that. It's because they know that part of history where they were letting everyone go and get off scot free, and it just led to the weakening of a nation. It led to them being conquered. And to this day, they're saying like China should have been much bigger, but because
Mm.
we were weak, this happened. And
That,
so,
that's really interesting because I mean, I think everybody, if you don't uphold your laws, then you're not really a nation. Uh,
mhm,
and I'm just thinking about like that ending part of the video where why would people follow the laws if they could see that these certain officers aren't following it? And I think that brings up a good point in which people should not get those special treatments. Rather, like, yes, I think it seems really obvious and simple for anybody looking that nobody should have special treatment based on who they, on their position
mhm,
or who their father is or who their parents are, things like that. But I think there needs to be an understanding on both sides. So if you worked really hard, and let's say you're a judge or even a politician, it makes sense that you yourself would want special treatment, right, for your family members. It's
right.
only human. It's only human that, let's say you're a president of a country and you want special privileges for your family members. But we should also think about the importance of the other citizens there, kind of like voting for what is good for them and what is not. Like actually putting up a riot if something is unjust. Like it makes sense that there's corruption. It makes sense because if you are like people say that they're gonna be all virtuous and maybe like the
Right.
best kind of person once they get to that a certain position, but it should be acknowledged that the temptation is there, and because the temptation is there and not everybody is perfect, it's not a surprise if corruption is going to happen, but when it
Mhm,
is found there should be something done about it. I
mhm,
think people simply want a fair trial on things that happen that they can like that is very obvious. I think an example of this in the United States is, for example, for Donald Trump was is one is has a what is it a federal record against him, and so people wanted him to go to jail. But then previous to that, Hillary Clinton was supposed to go to jail, and then
Mm,
Joe Biden's one of
yes,
his kids had to go to jail,
is
but none
under
of that
Biden.
has happened.
Yeah,
None of that
yeah,
has happened. So I think from a normal citizen's perspective, they just want things to actually happen rather than talking. And I'm
right.
guessing the Philippines is the same way, in which corruption, bad people in a particular occupation will happen. But once found, what are you going to do about it? And I
Mhm.
think the best, like, not even a benevolent dictator, it just, the system needs to have a check and balance in the Philippines as well. I mean, like, because what is the alternative? I'm just thinking.
Right.
Like, when I was there, well, Baguio is a little bit of a different story because I think everybody seems to like their mayor. And so I haven't really, I guess, heard or seen anything too bad.
Yeah, go ahead.
Um, but I'm just
Yeah.
thinking on how, like, what is the alternative that the person can, that a normal individual can do? Because in some ways, I know the new president of the Philippines is the son of um, that
Gross.
president
Yeah.
that you were mentioning. And so it's like the people have chosen, it looks like. And so, like, this is the consequences that's going to happen. And I
Hmm.
just feel like the individual can do so much more than they think they can do, but at the same time recognize that, I guess in this case, the people wanted his son, and I'm assuming the son kind of has the same ideology as his
Right.
father. And so, like, let's see where it happens, but I'm not familiar with that kind of track.
Right.
So
An interesting thing that I've found, or that I've come to understand about democracy, is, remember how I said earlier, the quote is like, democracy is, for government for the average person, and the average person really isn't that bright. I remember I start to think how this is probably why the U.S. is different, because of, or the U.S. is different because they have a republic voting system, whereas in the Philippines we have a voting system where we let everyone vote, literally everyone,
everyone
and
has the right to vote in the United
everyone,
States as well.
yeah, but like this is for like voting for the president and
Mhm.
for even his vice. Like if you vote for president, he could have a different vice president. We've had
Mhm.
so many cases where we've elected a president and then the vice president was like originally campaigning against him, and so like he or she would resign,
Mhm.
which is like great. And so we already see from that that it doesn't work. That
Well, I'm not sure
and
about that, Chris.
I
I
mean
I, I want to
it's
say I'm not sure
it
about that because people have chosen that. Like, and every 6 years it seems as though people have the chance to choose something completely different. Yet
right.
they are the ones that constantly vote for that. Especially now, I believe, with the social media kind of leveling the playing field a lot more. And I know the Philippines love their Facebook. And so people's thoughts and ideas are out there in the political Facebook, let's say, and then that
Okay.
kind of sways people on who they vote for. I'm not sure how much this guy won by, but assuming that it was, at least the voting system was integral and that there wasn't any
Right.
corruption,
Okay.
the people chose him for his thoughts, or it could be his looks, could be his, for the clout of his father, but the people
Okay.
chose that. And if the people want somebody that, let's say, is incompetent,
Right.
that's what the people have chosen. And,
Okay.
like, what else can you do except that is what you as a collective have chosen for the next 6 years?
I'm gonna push back against that because it's, yes, the people have chosen as who they elected, but here's the thing though. People, we as human beings are
Mm-hmm.
very illogical creatures.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first rule of humanity, is that we are illogical creatures. We don't we don't think of, we don't necessarily think of what is best. We usually we take actions and decisions based on how they make us feel.
Yeah, I agree.
And with that in mind, it's easy to manipulate a people during an election season. The other thing that I see as a problem with it is because not everyone, only very few people are educated in how the economy and politics work and the consequences that this brings about.
Yeah,
So
I agree.
so whenever we say that we were the ones who voted that people, I think a majority of the presidents, if not all of our presidents, we voted in out of ignorance, out
Sure.
of not being well educated, or not even being well thought of how they came to be, and are always drawn towards the promise of what they bring without even thinking of what this could actually do. And that has
Mhm.
just brought about the ruin that we are in right now. If you ask me, I don't think everyone should be given the right to vote. There's
Well,
that, and there's also like how easy it is to just corrupt the bottom line. If you're a
well,
poor person and
uh,
you're offered
I'm I'm thinking.
opportunities,
Mhm.
yeah, if you're
Sorry.
opportunity to buy your vote,
Mhm.
you'd sell it immediately.
Sure, but I'm thinking what you're saying, like how easy is it to manipulate the people? Well, how about the benevolent leaders? Why aren't they easily manipulating the people into
Mhm.
doing the better choice, in your opinion? Because how I'm hearing it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you feel like you think that you know better. You think that you know the better policies that people should be voting for. Not you yourself, but like certain select group of
Right,
people are smarter than the rest, and they could
right,
decide for other people. And
right,
isn't that what the president is kind of has been? He's not like sure he's been elected by the vast majority of people, but then from there he's doing the acts that supposedly should help the country. And like, what's the reversal if somebody is doing the opposite of what he's doing, or what he's doing is is what people don't want?
hmm
The thing is, he has been voted on, right? And your issue is that the vast majority of people who can be manipulated, can be dumb, for example, can choose somebody who is really awful. Yes. So in that case, the person that they voted in could do bad things to them. But like, what's the alternative? And I'm hearing from you like the alternative would probably be something similar to the United States, in which we have a republic. But then to kind of, I think at this point in time, to change the government from like the Philippines, like the people, those idiots, let's say, the vast majority of people, the average Joes, have to want a republic. And I don't think they do, because they've been
Actually,
choosing
yeah.
not a republic for this long.
On the contrary, though, um, I don't think that the Philippines should copy the USA Republic government style. In fact, I think it'd be ridiculous to even try and mimic that. There are things that work. There's this book called Tyranny of Experts,
Mm,
and one of the things that it is explained there is one of the flaws that non-government operations and nonprofit organizations do is they see something that works in one country, they try and implement it on another country, and it ends up making the problem worse. And that's because you have to understand that there are tiny factors, one big fact, or there are factors rather, that affect that not working or not. A big part of that is culture, the way of
mm.
life of people. And so, given the culture of the Philippines, I don't think it would be realistic to say that we could follow the US model of a government. I think it would be more realistic to follow, say, Vietnam or Singapore's style of government. Not communism. That would just be terrible. Um, but to follow
Why
the
not
benevolent,
communism?
it's proven, it's already proven so many times why it's not worked. Countries who did follow a communist structure ended up shifting to more of a benevolent dictatorship model. And I think the benevolent dictatorship model is somewhere more in the realm of possibility for the Philippines and the government. But the first thing we actually tried to do that, like I mentioned in the video, Duterte tried to do that. And I think one of the reasons that he wasn't as successful is because he had to worry about the next term. He had to worry about who would carry out his plans for the Philippines. And that was why he was hoping to he tried to confide with Marcos, but that didn't happen. It ended up in this rivalry instead that was so bitter that it led to him being tried by the International Criminal Court in The Hague in the Netherlands. And like I said earlier, we only remember the short term pain that we were about to, and we won't really get to experience the long term benefits because it was never finished. And so with this rivalry going on right now,
Mhm.
what lots of people are hoping that by the next presidential term, his daughter, who is planning to run for presidency, who is currently the vice president of the Philippines.
That's crazy.
um, yeah, the reason why they're trying so bad to impeach her is because they're hoping to stain her reputation and um, make it harder for her to win the elections for presidency during the next term. So former President Duterte is hoping is that the daughter would then carry out his plans and his investments that he's made, so that Filipinos can finally get that.
Well,
The
just
problem with that is I don't think it's going to be enough. We really have
uh,
to get rid of that. The first thing we need to do is we have to get rid of that law that says a president can only serve one term. It's a huge risk. You could probably end up with a very crappy dictator and end up worse off than what we were before. But there's also the possibility that we could have a really good benevolent dictator that would carry out these projects and finally reap the long-term
I,
benefits.
you know, as I'm hearing this, I'm kind of like, and we use that word dictator, and we've been kind of wishing like one person can solve all of the Philippines problems. And
Hmm.
sometimes, and now I'm thinking about it, why not trust the people of the Philippines?
Oh
And
gosh,
by
yeah.
that, I mean for the president to not like, because the previous presidents have invested all those things as well, not just
Hmm.
Duterte. They kind of want, I'm assuming, I'm hoping that they planted seeds that they wanted to see grow. And
Hmm.
uh, a lot of those seeds, they've been trampled on by other presidents. How about have a president have a term in which there's no extra seeds being planted, but let the plants that have been sown on just grow? I feel like there is a lot of this fear of the Philippine population, let's say, or just in general. And we got to see where the leadership of previous ideas and investments will take them. And not even that. How about the government just let the people do what they want? I What I mean by that is like a more conservative idea. And the thing that I'm also thinking that I potentially would work in the Philippines' favor, let because the Philippines is a very Catholic, very Christian nation, but a big sector of it is also not. It's kind of interesting how that is because in the United States, we could objectively say that the people have been influenced by Judeo-Christian values. Now, in the Philippines, there is that big aspect that there are a lot of Muslims and more of the southern side. And I'm not
Hmm.
sure how to reconcile between that culture of the Christian values with the Muslim values. And
Hmm.
I have heard that they are trying to be their own country. And in my mind, what is the
Huh.
harm in that? Because I think that in some ways they are the culture is so different from those particular areas. What's the harm there?
Right.
And once again, let the people do what they want. And this means they can shape their own laws
Okay.
and culture. And there are going to be certain laws and cultures that I as an individual do not agree with.
Okay.
However, there's that respect that they have chosen that for themselves, and let's see
Okay.
where that takes them.
So I don't think I still really don't think that we should let the people decide yet. And it has much to do in terms of maturity in in terms of how realistic people, how economics and politics should work. Because right now, we in some ways we are letting the people decide, and what people want is free healthcare, free education.
That's what they're
You know,
wanting.
yeah,
That's what they're
they're
wanting.
wanting that, but like they don't understand how this is very detrimental to everyone in the Philippines. They don't understand that when people pay taxes, this money has to come from somewhere. We are not as fortunate as the U.S. that could just print trillions of these dollars. You know why? Because when we do print these out, we end up like Zimbabwe, where we can't end up paying much of the world debt that we have. And the problem with this is we're very immature in seeing how all of this plays out. What are the long-term consequences, and even the unintended consequences? Well, we are
Mhm.
not very aware with that. Not even a lot of people. A lot of people even struggle with their financials.
Of
I
course.
am less confident in their ability to manage and to understand how
Well,
money would work in an economy. Do you remember? If I'm not sure if you saw this video, there was this video where a dad has his son choose between $10,000 and two Oreos, and guess which the kid picked?
two
The kid,
Oreos.
yeah, the kid wanted the two Oreos. Why? Because he did not understand the value
Well,
of $10,000
I,
yet.
I,
And
I
so
think
we're not yet there.
so. I understand those concerns.
Right.
However, I also, as I hear them, it sounds like a very elitist mindset. And maybe the Philippines does need that. But to me, as I hear that, I completely understand. It's like, yo, there's a lot of people that need their decisions to be made for them because
Mhm,
they are yet um, intelligent enough to kind of take care of themselves. Yet
mhm.
I think there is a level of faith that I have in general in people,
Ah,
and like that could be my naivete,
right.
but at the same time, even at the how I see the worst case scenario happening is the people have brought it upon themselves. I feel like in this case, it is your responsibility as an individual to help other individuals. Like really, your first responsibility is to your family, to help your family understand better principles, and then kind of towards your neighbors and towards a bigger community, to your town, and then something bigger, and then eventually your country, and then to the world. And so you have that responsibility to make sure that their wrong think is more correct. But
Hmm.
the during that time that you're trying to influence the individuals, the country itself is making those big decisions, and
Mm.
unfortunately sometimes they make really terrible ones. Like how I see it is like maybe in Germany somebody with common sense can kind of see what's going on. They're a German, they have German pride, and they want the country to do better, but then unfortunately the country have chosen the Nazi party, for example. So what can you do there? Once again, your responsibility is to yourself first, and then to your family and to your neighbors, and kind of going out from there, starting internally. In those cases, if that country cannot support your principles,
Mhm.
you have to get out. Or like, what can you do? What is the alternative? Like, so you have to get out. Like, and that's just unfortunate.
Yeah.
Like, it's so easy to say and so hard to do. Yes, but that's the kind of adaptability that human beings are capable of doing. And so I understand. Like, I agree with you that people should make better decisions. Like that's like a no-brainer. However, the decisions that they do make, they have
Mhm.
to be allowed to feel those consequences. And
Mhm.
like I'm seeing it as almost as if you're like a parent that doesn't want their child to like touch the stove. But then how I see it is that's not a child. That is an adult, like that is an adult that wants to touch the stove for some reason or another. And as much as we don't want them to, It's like they're equal to us at that point, even though we might have brought them up. And so let them face those consequences, and hopefully through persuasion and
Right.
reasoning, we're able to make them like do better.
I'm no. I really just can't. I can't side with you in this one because I wish I could have more faith in the people. I wish I could
But
have
what's
that
the
much.
alternative?
It's
My
like
issue is like the alternative here, and who, like, you're judging it from your point of view, but who's the judge on to say like the Philippines is being a success or not? Like, who's the judge? Who's going to be these elite few to choose what is best for 120 million people, 130 million people? What is the bar to meet? Did you have to have a bachelor's? Is everybody a PhD? Like, what is the bar to get to the point of you're able to vote for the more
again,
important things in your country?
yeah, I can. Like, it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard. I just don't think that having complete freedom to choose and do whatever you want and make whatever laws you want, especially by the people, is the solution. Do you know why?
Oh,
One of the
mhm.
consequences. Well, one of the consequences that we have to be aware of is the issue of moral hazard. If people make these,
No,
no,
I
no, here,
actually,
here,
okay.
because if people make dumb decisions
Hmm.
and they don't really live long enough to reap the long-term consequences. Like, let's say a person who's 60 years old votes for a certain law that benefits him for the
Yeah,
next
just
10
purely
years
him.
of his life. Yeah,
Mhm.
and then he dies. He doesn't live to
No,
suffer the
I,
long-term consequences
yes,
of it.
no, I actually think that fear is irrational, because so I used to think like that, but then I think there was a, maybe it was Jordan Peterson that kind of helped me better understand that people have a normal self-preservation for them and their family. You were thinking about it as if that 60-year-old person has no kids or grandkids, and they're just like, screw you all, it's all me now. That is not going to be the case. And at the very worst, if it is, that is what the people have chosen as as a general rule. But I don't think that is going to be the case. I think what's going to happen, and like in this lawless land, right? We're thinking of everybody can just murder everybody else. Like, your neighbor was loud and noisy, you can kill them in their sleep. That's not the case, because if you can do that to them, they can do that to you. And so there is a natural balancing of powers between this lawlessness. And I think a great example of this is the Wild Wild West in the United States. Well, it's the United States, but people are people. In this Wild Wild West, like, the government doesn't have control of really what's happening in the West yet, because it's so new. There's so much. People are conquering land. People are saying, like, there's so many disputes. Like, how can you do it? People naturally made certain rules and laws and regulations in their particular place of town, and then that has to be respected, or you're either kicked out, or a duel's going to happen, or somebody, the bigger dog wins. Let's say. And I
Right.
think in this transition, let's say, of people able to choose what they want, there's that extreme that you're thinking of is in the movies. It is not going to happen. More than likely it won't happen. But if it does, that's also the choice of the people. As much as I don't want, like, I might not agree with it. I'm like, I'm gonna say maybe some more crazy examples just to kind of put it out there. But, like, for example, maybe there's gonna be uh the people have chosen that because there's too many people, too many population. If you're under the age of 1, like, you can cook that person like a chicken. Like just putting it out there, like, super crazy example.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't agree with it. Like, holy crap, that's awful. But if the people in power, and like the people have chosen to do that, I don't agree with it. But that is like part of their culture. That is their thing. I don't agree with it. Hopefully they don't do it. But, like, that's a thing that could happen. Um, and so I don't think, like, all these extremes though that I kind of just put in, I don't think it's really going to happen. More people are going to be a lot more normal than we're going to think. There's going to be things that we're going to view, like maybe from the West, like eating your dog or cat or something. It's kind of weird, but that's people. Like, that's not really hurting anybody else per se. And so let them choose that, because then what's going to happen is there's going to be these baskets of really amazing communities. And what's going to happen is the awful communities are going to, the people that don't want to be in that awful community will naturally gravitate towards the better community. And that's what the countries are doing, right? That's why there's so many people moving to the United States, for example. And so in the Philippines, they just need more freedom to do what people generally want. And I think the reason why the United States is so so successful is not because of its wealth. It's because of that freedom to do things. And people with their freedom decided not to want to just kill everybody. Like, they want to get along with their neighbors with those Judeo-Christian values. People generally vote with those, with what they wanted, with those Judeo-Christian values, and like so on and so forth. I think the Philippines can do that. I think the Philippines they need somebody who's not trying to fix everybody's problems. I think they need somebody who can not make more laws, not trying to fix everybody's problem. They just need to have the execution of justice and mercy. Justice, never mind the mercy. They need to execute the justice of what people are expecting and uphold it. That's all they need to do. You don't need somebody that is benevolent. You can actually have a selfish president that, as long as they do that one thing, the execution of justice, I think the country itself would do so much better. And I think the population, in terms of people getting smarter or doing things that would benefit the country through the selfishness of that president, would work out. This kind of reminds me of the selfishness of an entrepreneur. You know, you have to be so selfish that, for example, if you're running like a car mechanic company, you have to be so selfish that you gotta fix that car so good that they're gonna talk well about you. It's like a company. Like, you're gonna be so selfish that, like, you care about money so much that you're gonna treat the people right. You're gonna make sure that you are the number one car mechanic shop in your, initially, like maybe in your small pocket of place, and into a bigger place, into a bigger place. Like, you're gonna be so selfish that you're so focused on your company doing so much better. And I think that's how, in a change of perspective, the president has to do, by not doing anything, by already putting into place what is already there. Like, there needs to be a level of respect here, because like you and I, Chris, like we graduated in the same university, but like, who's going to be the judge of like whose idea is better or not? It's like, I can't imagine a lot of people in the Philippines thinking that you are a better judge than them just because you graduated in a United States university. Or what is that what is that bar that where you're trying to kind of make for that pocket of elite people that can decide who the next president is, or the next smart people, like next decision makers? Who are those people? I'm saying let the free market decide that. And you know, it could be this humble person that is a carpenter that has all these amazing, great ideas, and not somebody with like the PhD that studied economic theory. Because so I'm just saying, let the free market do it. And I don't think with the free market that has the highest of highs and also the lowest of lows, it will naturally, you'd be surprised that people would naturally lean towards trying to get to the highest of highs.
Okay. So what I'm understanding is what you're saying is that to be able to get to that level of choosing a dictator who ensures that these laws are being followed, we need to let the people decide who that person is going to be.
No. I'm sorry. I think you misunderstood.
Okay. So, yeah.
So there needs to be the person that's going to be a president simply
Okay.
has to execute justice. They don't have to do anything more than that. They do not need to make even more laws. It's sometimes we're thinking, have our previous ancestors been that stupid that they never thought about X, Y, and Z? Like, do we need more laws to maybe define what murder is per se? Like, there's already all these laws that I'm sure your predecessors have done because they hopefully have been thinking about making the solution. But like you said, it takes time. I think one of the greatest presidents in the Philippines can ever do is simply be that time period, be that time that other ideas can blossom. And so that means they need to execute what's been implemented and simply wait out their time. That way, the fruits, like the plants that have been growing, can actually produce fruit that we can then compare. Because too many of the plants have been trampled on with more and more laws, with more gravel on top of the plant, so that it cannot have the room to grow and succeed. So
Okay.
all I'm saying is that whoever this is, it doesn't have to be anybody special. Simply execute justice. We don't need more laws. We don't need more of their wherever they lean left or right. They just need to execute what is already in place and see what happens from there. Because I believe that after 6 years of that, 6 years of amazing growth, the people will then, like, hopefully what's going to happen is the people can vote for somebody else for more of that 6 year time span. But what's probably going to happen is because of the wealth that has been growing after those 6 years, people are now going to start acting very virtuous, and there's going to be more free healthcare and all that. But like, I think if anything, let's focus on having that 6 years of time for the investments to grow.
So here's an interesting question for you. Like, there's definitely going to be good investments that haven't grown to their full potential, but then there's going to be bad investments
Mm-hmm.
that are also going to grow to its full potential. It's going to get
Mm-hmm.
worse. So, like, who's going to be then? Who then is going to have to decide which investments to let grow or not?
Well, I think the
So
people are. I think the people are, because that's what they have voted for. That's what they wanted to initially.
yeah, but it goes back to the flaw that I say that people aren't exactly too mature
Oh.
when it comes to understanding the unintended consequences that such of these things can bring. And also the issue of the moral hazard that this comes up. Like, I'd like to really think that we live in a world where we don't see, we don't suffer the short-term benefits, but we're very short-minded people, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We don't really think too far into the long term, that I think these problems are going to stem up again. And with the issue of free market, like you get to vote with your feet rather of whether
Mm-hmm.
you want to stay or not. I don't think that the Philippines is in that capacity or in that area where we can freely let people do that. One of the first things that you're going to have to understand is that, if it truly is free, then people can leave whenever they want to. But here the issue is people can leave
No.
if
No.
they can afford to move.
Mm-hmm.
And where are these people going to go? It'd be nice if they could just go anywhere, but then
Yeah.
visa
No. Yeah. Yeah.
issues are no problem.
No, they are free to leave, to also to if they are willing to pay for the price that it takes to leave. Like,
Hmm.
what I'm simply asking is for more free market, for more people to choose what they have done, and then like also face those consequences. Just like right now, the United States, like we're talking about these resources. The United States is the biggest country that has the most debt. Like, let's not forget
Hmm.
that it has the most debt. And so a lot of what's happening with Social Security, Medicaid, the people have been choosing to kick the can down the road for the next generation to fix it, for the next generation to fix it. Eventually, some generation has to fix it. Eventually, we're gonna have to like turn down Medicaid, Medicare, because that's the biggest
Right.
expense. So
See,
eventually we're going to face those consequences. I'm not like eventually like, we have to face that. And no president, including Donald J. Trump, has addressed it. It has to be addressed, or else probably my generation is going to face its wrath in like
mhm.
15, 20 years. So eventually somebody's going to have to face it. You're we're looking at the United States as if it's a shining example, but like we're doing the same thing the economic terms. But I think like there's a lot more because of the freedoms we're able to create more. It's not the consumption that is good; it is the production. So the United States being able to produce a lot more stuff helps it helps it consume more stuff as well. In the Philippines, there simply needs to be more economic freedom to face those kind of consequences. Let people do what they want to do. And I don't agree with a lot. Maybe there could even be a success in terms of like a casino in the Philippines. Hong Kong kind
Right.
of does it. China does it. I can see the Philippines doing that. I don't agree with it, but I can see it being a success. So like what I'm really getting at is let the people choose, because the alternative is, who are these elites? We're talking as if like you're a part of that.
No.
Because like who are these elites? Are they supposed to have a PhD? Are they supposed to have a military background? What is who is the decider of that? That's my biggest gripe with this. And to me, I'm saying I have no idea. And so let the people choose. I am not better than anybody else, so let the people choose. Like I think there's the idea that like, oh, like there's a college student, somebody has a bachelor's or somebody graduated with certain certificates, and then that's what makes them better. But then it comes down to like the validation of those certificates. Is that even valid? Maybe you graduated with gender studies. Like, are you actually smarter than somebody who didn't? I'd actually argue the opposite. You're actually dumber for having graduated with that. And so,
Mhm.
who is the decider? And I'm saying I cannot decide. So let people as a collective decide. People as individuals decide for themselves.
So when I'm thinking about that, I'm thinking that, I still stand by my sentiment where I think it should be this one type of model, this one type of person that has to
But
structure it in such a way, because
but who right now is even like that?
that's that yeah that's another separate issue that we have to address, like understanding and knowing who would be that type of person. See,
I think. Uh,
the reason why I like why I think it's the model that could work is really it's less about just giving to it's less about giving so much people the ability, because there's not too much of an understanding of how it works yet.
mhm.
And it's more of trusting a single person to be able to make all these necessary changes and to trust the process, like similar to what you brought up about
Mhm.
Medicaid and Medicare. Some other person is going to be held other person is going to suffer the consequences for the amount of debt that this is piling up. That's the moral hazard that I'm talking about, is that while we're busy making all these decisions,
Mhm.
there are consequences that are being piled up as we go. And so the later we decide to act on this, the later we decide to have like a single person start to cut down and manage all of this, it's going to be hard. It's going to be harsh. Like I don't see this as a system that a lot of people would want to vote for, or what would even want to put in place.
Mhm.
If I think about places like Vietnam and Singapore, it wasn't really the people voted for it. It was more like
It was imposed on them.
Yeah, it was imposed on them.
Sure.
But the good thing about it is like the thing that makes it very very hard to follow that kind of structure is because these people with the current system in the Philippines, these people have to worry about the next term. They have to worry about convincing people to have the people who they would like to run for the next term to
Sure.
continue their work. Whereas in these countries,
You
you
don't have
don't
to worry
really
about that.
you don't have to worry about that. They
No.
could just do these projects, and
Well,
it's worked out really really nicely for them.
sure, but then you could also have a situation like Russia.
Right. Again, that's the risk that I mentioned.
No,
It all comes down to a coin flip, where if it's gonna
no,
be a
but I
single
don't think
person.
it needs to necessarily be 50-50. I think it is a gradual, for sure chance that the Philippines will do better. Like I can't imagine almost like living in a country and just assuming that the majority of people wants the worst for you. Like if that is really the case, yeah, like that country is doomed from the get go. It's just taking a long time to get to that doom stage. But
It's not the worst. It's not that they want the worst case scenario. It's that they don't know that they're actually picking the
no.
worst case
So
scenario.
this is where I think the individual comes in. You, Chris, for example, are responsible for your for kind of advocating for what you believe is right. I don't believe in one individual single person to like do everything. And I think a great example of this when I think about it is like Jesus Christ, like he's the best example. And so like how many of them are there? One. And so we're expecting perfection from a benevolent dictator to know every detail to fix your life when that's not the case. And it kind of brings me back into the idea of the plan of salvation here, where you're here to kind of make decisions, make like choices, good, better, best. And you need to kind of figure that out as you adapt and learn more information. And you, as an individual, need to kind of help other people like that. I think the idea of a benevolent dictator is just an excuse for people, for good people not to do anything because they're going to expect like it's just a 50-50 or somebody's going to come down the line and then everything's going to be good again. I think that's what make people make those excuses. And so as a general rule, like if your location, the group of people you're with aren't what you kind of want, try to change them. Like you are also influencing them just like they are influencing you. And so I want to put more emphasis on those individuals to focus like on yourself to help others. Because then eventually with that, if every individual has my mindset kind of deal, like then that country, that population would do so much better. I just cannot imagine like if you're thinking this alternative where generally speaking people kind of maybe not the worst case scenario, but people want what's bad for you. People want what's so everybody like your neighbors are thinking that, your neighbors are thinking that. So then where in the heck is this benevolent individual gonna come out from if everybody's already bad? So I just can't I can somewhat understand it, but I think it's actually really irrational. So the best thing that we can do is just these individuals, like, first of all, have the faith that they're gonna do better than you think they are, and if they're not, like they're gonna face those consequences. So let
Right.
them choose for themselves, and you as a hopefully an influence for good. If they're like a 50-50 to become good or bad, hopefully your influence can make them a 51-49, 51% good, 49% bad, right? And then hopefully
It'd
that
be
their influence can help another person.
I'm hoping, like, well, if that's gonna be the case, and if we're really heading in the direction, I really hope so. I don't have as much confidence as you have that that would be the case, because I really think, again, it's not because people want the worse off situation. It's because they don't know what the worse off situation is, and even aware that it could lead to that, such things could
I
lead to that.
think I
I
think
th-
in some ways
and
that's also very elitist to think
you know,
because
because
like
here.
Mhm.
Let me tell you something. So there's let me, and the reason for this is like some of my experience. One of my most recent experiences is because there was this post online about how it was obviously AI generated content
Mhm.
in my mind, and knowing how debt and financing works, I was able to calculate and I was able to understand that this story is made up
Mhm.
because according to this person, they're paying a debt for 20 years at such a low interest,
Mhm.
and the debt wasn't even as outstanding when it began.
Yeah.
So my pushback was that it's this person's fault. If this story was real, it's this person's fault for not choosing to pay it off and accumulating this much debt. But what other people could only focus on was not that it was a ridiculous story or not that this person didn't choose to pay it off immediately. Their focus was that the government should have solved this problem. And again, I don't think that the government should solve every citizen's problems, because first and foremost of
So
all,
no benevolent dictator.
yeah,
So we should
there's
have one, or a bad one either. We should have a dictator. Period.
yeah, because like can yeah, we should, because like think about this situation is ridiculous that not a lot of people would understand,
No, but
that this
I
it
think
could be an easily solved problem, but they don't want the individual to solve it. They want the government to come in
of
and
course,
solve it, but
of course,
it's not
but that's
supposed to
human
work.
nature. Of course, that's human nature. It's called being responsible, right? And we recognize that being responsible, even for ourselves, to be 100% responsible, is very difficult. It's
Mhm.
very easy to find excuses, but that's not an epiphany, right? Like that's something really common and basic, and everybody knows it.
Fair, yeah.
And so, what I'm saying is, like, let's say that lie, right? Like, I'm hoping that somebody in the comment section like kind of pushes back and like says the logical things, but and it is discouraging maybe to kind of see people backing a lie or something that is just completely false. But then it is up to you who is able to see what you can see to kind of help other people see by pushing back, by commenting. And so with that, sure, there's gonna be a lot, because I was also a kid that kind of believed in like Santa Claus, for example, or like
Mm,
something very fictional. But then you grow up and like you have eyes to see, and so you then have a I would say you would have a responsibility to your fellow man to kind of help them see, but at the same time, you're not going to force them. You're not going to impose those values. In the case of Singapore, like it seems to be a positive, but there's so many examples out there also where the government will impose this or that, and it
true.
will cause a lot of death. So my point being, let the people choose, and generally speaking, the better ideas will prevail. It's gonna I think as a general faith in mankind, it as a positive view on mankind, it is
Right.
gonna happen. And it is discouraging when you see something so blatantly obviously not correct. But that's like, okay, you see it, so now what? Like, I think there's a lot of stuff that I see growing up, like without technology, I was able to experience real world interactions, but a lot of people maybe not have maybe are more technologically like using technology more. They kind of
Right.
fail to have that connection, and so they kind of assume certain ideas between, for example, male and female, that the differences, and this is how people get red pilled a little bit, or like kind of blue pilled, and that kind of change, that kind of theorization of what an individual likes or dislikes because of their
Right.
sex or their
Right.
orientation. It's all like based on this theory, but they haven't really experienced real world people, which is people are really just normal. People really are normal and they want to do good generally. is how I see
Right.
it. But
I
yeah.
I think in any case, in both of our scenarios, there's the best case scenario. In the examples that we brought up and the types of government that we envisioned, there's always the best case and worst case scenario. And you know, I'm glad you brought it up actually, because in any case, failing to see what the worst case scenario could possibly be, and really just basically acknowledging any flaws in your thoughts or in your opinions, is a dangerous slope to go down to. Like I am as narcissistic as I am, um, there really needs to be some acknowledgement that we're trying a lot of things in the span of the time that humanity has been on Earth. We have nowhere we have not come nearly as close to that ideal perfect government, but hopefully, and in this case, I think you and I will not live definitely not live long enough to see that.
Well,
But
I think we're getting close to, like,
right,
this is
we're
funny.
getting
This could
close
be a
to it.
completely different topic, but just like maybe a preview for another topic was like, I think a certain church has the greatest governmental structure, but um, like what we're talking about with the Philippines, the I cannot imagine the people in the Philippines wanting the worst, or um just not like do it. What's best for
Yes.
them as a general rule should also be what's best for their neighbor, and so on and so forth, and eventually the country. And so with that said, there's so much potential there. I think maybe a bit of your pessimism is kind of coming from maybe what's being shown over in the social medias, and of
True.
course that's called
Like
the natural man, right? It
like a
happens.
bias. There's a word for that kind of bias, but yeah.
Like, so there's there's those perspectives. So just I'm just thinking also, like, generally speaking, people want to want more stuff, and I think having that ability to choose for themselves is gonna get them there. Like, you were mentioning about companies not being able to invest in the Philippines because they need to have a holding company,
Hmm.
things like that. So there needs to be a time. Oh, actually, it kind of reminds me of the president of Argentina. We'll see how it goes, but I think as a general rule, Argentina is gonna prosper so much more when
Who's
he's taking that
President
very
Lee? Like,
economic. He's taking that very economic approach of really people will choose for themselves on what they want, economically speaking, voting with their feet.
is this the president who gave that chainsaw to
Yep,
Elon?
yep.
Okay, okay. So we're thinking of this. Yeah, I think it would him and the president of El Salvador are two leaders that I'm watching. Um, I think everyone in the world is watching very very closely because their approach towards it is fascinating, and we'll have to see that in the upcoming years. Hopefully, again, I don't want to wish that we immediately just copy their system and kind of paste it into how the Philippines should work. Again, there's some flaws in that logic, but hopefully we can learn a few things and somehow have a similar type of structure, not a perfect copy of a structure, but have a similar structure, one that works for the Filipino people and even for citizens around the world. Who knows? This is going to be a huge thing. But yeah, I'm. It's going to be an intriguing time. It's going to be a time to watch all this very, very closely. Uh, Oh, you're mute.
Yeah, thanks. So I think just some final thoughts on my end is that people want what's best for their families. Here, I think that's I haven't used that word too often, but like rather than individuals, families wants what's best for families, and so that would expand to like a smaller selection. And because we can only really care so much for like a select people, your family can then extend to friends and neighbors, and then up to that point, maybe even like a city or a town, is where then others, your domino effect will touch another domino effect, and that is how explosive like love and growth and prosperity can actually intertwine with how politics can be, where there's a lot of politicking, like you were mentioning about terms. People have to think about those things, but then it's up to you as an individual to help your family. If you think you know what's best, you gotta inform them of those ideas, and then they as an individual have to decide internally amongst themselves, what do they believe in, what do they agree with, how do they see the world. And with that, I think the worldviews of the country kind of gets shaped, and then that's how we then choose that benevolent leader, or not even that, just like a normal person, with their best intentions would reach certain conclusions that would allow other people to make their own conclusions about things, and they might not agree with them. And for me personally, how I model my governmental ideas and beliefs, part of it is obviously the United States, and mainly is the plan of salvation, with the idea that you get to choose for yourselves and you're here to learn and grow. But yeah, we've been talking for a while, but that's my closing thought.
Yeah, can't end it better than that. All right, thanks everyone joining us. That's a wrap for the pod.
Thank you.